Okay.
is present.
Before I share the floor with Dr. Kun and others, because all the audience here can ask you questions, I just want to make the foundation, yeah, so the audience will be guided when they ask questions. So that's why I asked several questions as a foundation. So I would like to ask you, what is one, in which way you do you view the Western categorization of drugs nowadays? Because you talk about shamanism with medical plant, but also in the world now, we have the Western categorization of drugs where these medical plants are illegals, right?
Yes, and it's been most of those substances are like still under the part of the Geneva Convention, and that's the one thing that has been blocking a part of the development of those plants and psychedelic all over the world, is that they are still regulated in most countries in the world. There is not many places where we can actually practice directly with the plant. So mostly either we practice with the Icaro or with the chant or with the singing or with plants that are not psychedelic to open the trance. But the most effective plants in which we work with are mainly used in countries like Peru. And yes, because of the view of the Western world over plants and drugs and regulation. Today, we don't have really the capacity to practice in many countries. And we are limited towards the practice of the ayahuasca plant by itself, and mostly in countries where those regulations are still in place. And I mean, we're talking about more than half of the world, like yes. Even would say 2/3 of the world. It takes a time to really open. You were talking about Thailand or Malaysia, like a little bit earlier, about our places in Indonesia, but still we have like a huge criminalization, for instance, of any psychedelic plant or plant that are even like plant that are actually sacrament. For instance, we have in Aceh in Indonesia, cannabis is one of the master plant, a plant that they use for everything, that they use for cooking, that they use for their skin, that they use for even building houses. And in many places we still have like tribal usage of plant spirit in still many places in the world. And if we're talking about now in Indonesia, those traditions are still very present. I mean, in Bali until 2015, psilocybe mushroom were still legal and were consumed by many people by local population. There are many traditions that where psychedelic plant or the shamanism of plant spirit, or as a traditional use, it's still very present. And that's the one thing that our world, how we see psychedelic and how we see plants in general, the traditional use of plants, will shift within the next years, within the next decade, actually, because there is a potential, a healing potential that hasn't been completely recovered. And now that those people, that we have like a lot of scientists and associations, people all over the world that are really working deep, and Oregon is one of the first states, for instance, also in the US, where studies are conducted and where they are opening also the legislation for the use of those plants.